Welcome, everyone. We are so excited for the second day of our Fall Science of Reading webinar week, Comprehension Connections, Building the Bridge Between Reading and Understanding. Every day this week, we'll be hosting webinars at 3 p.m. Eastern and 12 p.m. Pacific, exploring reading comprehension. Today's session is being recorded, and we'll share the recording link via email later this week. If you'd like to access closed captioning, please click on the CC button in the bottom tray and then show captions. You'll also receive a certificate of attendance for today's session, as well as every other session you attend live. So be sure to register for the rest of the series at amplify.com/fall-SOR webinars, even if you can't make all of them. We'll send out recording links for all the webinars you register for. My name is Laura Almazara, and I'm on the literacy team here at Amplify, and we're thrilled to have you all here with us. We welcome comments in the chat, and to start, let's find out where everyone is joining us from. Oh, I just saw Queen Creek. I live in Tempe, so welcome, neighbor. Got people from all over. As usual, we love that. We love to see people from all over the US, and we occasionally get a couple people from outside the country. I think I just saw Barcelona as well. So thank you for joining us, no matter where you're coming from and no matter what time it is. We really appreciate it. So today we're learning about comprehension and knowledge building, and we have the wonderful Dr. Sonia Cabell and Dr. Haijin Huang. Our session is called Comprehension and Knowledge Building, a Two-Way Street. Dr. Sonia Cabell is the R. Keith and Patricia Duggan Sigmund Endowed Professor of Reading Education in the School of Teacher Education and core faculty in the Florida Center for Reading Research at Florida State University. Before receiving her PhD at the University of Virginia, she worked as a second grade teacher and literacy coach in Oklahoma and Virginia. Dr. Cabell's research focuses on early language and literacy instruction with a particular interest in preventing reading difficulties in young children. She has authored over 70 publications, including peer-reviewed articles, books, and book chapters. She is the lead editor of the Handbook on the Science of Early Literacy from Guilford Press, and she co-authored Literacy Learning for Infants, Toddlers, and Preschoolers, Key Practices for Educators from the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and Strive for 5 Conversations from Scholastic. Dr. Cabell has served as principal investigator or co-principal investigator on federally funded research projects totaling approximately $10 million. She has been an advisor or consultant for a variety of organizations and state departments of education in the United States. We also have Dr. Haijin Huang, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Psychology at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. She earned her PhD in Educational Studies at the University of Michigan and worked as a postdoctoral scholar at the Florida Center for Reading Research. Her research interests revolve around reading comprehension and content learning in the K-12 setting, particularly for multilingual students. Dr. Huang's work has been published in research journals such as Reading Research Quarterly and Scientific Studies of Reading, as well as practitioner journals such as The Reading Teacher and Reading in Virginia. Her work has been supported by the Institute of Education Sciences, the American Educational Research Association, the American Psychological Association Division 15 for Educational Psychology, and the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program at the University of Minnesota. We have some incredible women here with us today, so I just want to say one more time, welcome Dr. Cabell and Dr. Huang, and pass the mic over to you two.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. We're really excited to be here today. And we're going to be talking about comprehension and knowledge building, a two-way street. For today, we have both Haijin and myself. I'll start our talk off by talking about knowledge and language comprehension, particularly in the early grades and how those are connected. And then knowledge building literacy instruction in K through 2. Then Haijin will kick us off with knowledge building and reading comprehension, and talking about knowledge building literacy instruction in the upper grades with classroom implications. I'm so excited to be here with you and excited to see all the people online and all the engagement in the chat that's already there. If you have questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm not sure whether we're going to have time to answer a lot of questions at the end, but if we have remaining time, we will try to answer some of those questions. So let's start by talking about knowledge and language comprehension. Now, what is language comprehension? So language comprehension includes both oral language and background knowledge. So when I think about language comprehension, the background knowledge, the knowledge I bring to the table affects my reading, or my listening. So when I listen to something read out loud to me, or when I engage in a conversation, my knowledge is all automatically, I'm bringing that to bear. The vocabulary, the language structures, and the verbal reasoning portion are what I think of when I think of oral language. So the vocabulary, the breadth and depth of our vocabulary knowledge or knowledge of words, the language structures, the syntax, both our understanding and our use, and the verbal reasoning, how abstract our language is, inferential language use versus literal. So those pieces, those oral language pieces and those knowledge pieces are such an important part of language comprehension, of being able to understand what we're reading or listening to. However, a recent report of legislation in the United States shows that these very pieces are left out of the legislation. Now, our legislation across most states does include phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension, but these really important skills of oral language and content knowledge are not emphasized in legislation, but they're critical. They're critical to our learning, and they must be in place. They also take time to build, so need to be built very early on. I want you to take a look at this passage. I'm going to read it to you. And I want you to think to yourself, what's going on here? Customarily, 6 to 8 ushers create the arch. The ushers may be commissioned officers from different branches of service and thus in different uniforms. If that many ushers are not needed, other military guests may be asked in advance to assist the ushers in performing the service. I want you to take a moment and think, what is this talking about? I usually get one of two responses. It's probably dropping in the chat right now. I often get a funeral. I sometimes get a wedding. And I get something in between sometimes that is some sort of military service, but I'm not sure what. You would be correct if you said a wedding. This is the Arch of Sabers ceremony, and this is my wedding picture from 1998 with my parents in the background. And you go down the Arch of Sabers at the end after you're married, and the last person kind of hit me in the behind with his saber and said, "Welcome to the Army." Um, you might have known all the words in that passage, but you might not have really understood what it said, and you might not be able to learn from it. Oh, thanks for all the love. I'm seeing all the love on the my wedding picture. Thank you guys. That makes me feel so good. Um, we can't, if we don't know information about something, we can know the vocabulary words, but not really have an overall mental representation. The creating of that overall mental representation is what we think of as a schema. I like to think of a spider web analogy here because a spider web analogy, a tight, beautiful spider web, does not allow things to go through it, flies and such. So if I know a lot about a topic and you think about a topic of knowledge and all the associated ideas and words around it, if my knowledge of that is pretty tight, when I learn new things, that new knowledge will stick to my web versus going right on through. So the way we organize and connect knowledge in our brain includes both our background knowledge and our language. So that language comprehension construct is really critical. Now, in curricula, um, we often activate background knowledge, right? Activate it. But how do you activate it if you don't already have it? No amount of my activating background knowledge will help me to learn something that I don't know unless I build that knowledge too. And more, there have been approaches that have looked at integrating literacy and content instruction. A lot of these approaches have been happening in the English language arts, where you'll have these knowledge building programs that integrate science and social studies learning into English language arts. Hagen and I studied this, we did a meta-analysis, which is a study of studies, looking at when you integrate literacy and content knowledge, um, is that valuable for children's vocabulary and their comprehension? And we found that when looking at K-5, either experiments or quasi-experiments, we found that there were moderate to large effects on children's vocabulary and comprehension, and some significant effect on standardized comprehension, and while maintaining a large effect on content knowledge. We were able to see from these that there is some promise in this integration. It's promising to integrate and it either that in the English language arts block or in the science and social studies block, there's promise in integrating knowledge building approaches and literacy approaches. And that integration is generally in the oral language and content knowledge build. I also did two randomized control trials on core knowledge language arts. I believe you're going to get the slides after this, and there's a link to an open source article in the Journal of Educational Psychology where we reported our findings. We found very similar findings to the meta-analytic findings, that there was impacts on vocabulary and content knowledge. And in some cases, there were stronger benefits for students that start the year with better oral language skills. So, for example, if you look on the graph on the left, you see that when students score a standard deviation above the mean on the PPVT, looking at the x-axis, if you go up to the y-axis, you can see that on the post-test, there is a difference between the treatment and control condition there. That's showing that on a vocabulary test of words that were taught, as well as the graph on the right shows the same pattern for plants, the knowledge about plants. Children with higher language coming in appeared to benefit more from the intervention, from the curriculum. That's not an unusual finding. That's actually a pretty typical finding, when we have knowledge and language, we can learn more and even more from additional knowledge and language learning. Now, when we think about why, I like to think about why content knowledge instruction can help children's vocabulary and comprehension. And I think about how content-rich conversations give teachers and students something to talk about. And this is really important because in prior work, training teachers to be conversationally responsive partners with children and trying to improve language learning environments, my colleagues and I found that it was really difficult to change the way teachers and children talked with one another. We have really kind of fixed patterns of interaction that are really hard to shift. And so what I wanted to understand was, are there certain settings where teachers more more readily um, use rich vocabulary or richer language modeling techniques? And in one of my prior studies, I found that indeed teachers demonstrated better language modeling during science. Now, and this is a graph, this is from a study of preschool teachers in 2013 that looked at their instruction across the day, across these different settings, and on this graph where the letters differ from one another, those are significant differences. The y-axis is the classroom assessment scoring system, particularly the instructional support, and drilled down into the language modeling, if you're familiar with the class. You could see here that the science outperformed even the shared reading. The shared reading was the read alouds that were not based on science or social studies, that were the other read alouds. Science included read alouds as well as activities, and there was a difference between teachers reading in the science versus other shared reading. And this is important because that science was the only one that even met the threshold for um, relation to children's outcomes. Okay. Now, in addition to this, I've also found that teachers using CKLA also improve their after reading conversations. With when CKLA is no longer in the mix, when they read a text, when they read aloud on their own after using CKLA for a year, they tended to have richer discussions after reading that were more cognitively demanding for children. And I found this to be rather inspiring because we are reading aloud to children in pre-K through 2 settings a lot more than just our curriculum, right? We're reading, and the ways we're interacting with children matter to their learning. that leads me to thinking about what are some knowledge building literacy instructional approaches. And we're going to talk about knowledge building literacy instructional approaches that you can use throughout this presentation. But I'm going to really focus on one strategy here, one area here, and that really is around content-rich interactive read alouds. What we see in preschool through second grade um, approaches is that the vehicle for knowledge building in the English language arts are these content-rich interactive read alouds that are based on coherent text sets, conceptually coherent text sets that build knowledge incrementally. What's important about these are the conversations, in addition to the texts, what's important are the conversations that happen extratextually, that are outside of the reading itself. So conversations before, during, and after the read aloud. It's also important that these texts are syntactically more complex than what children are able to read on their own, because this exposes them to the syntactic structures as well as the vocabulary that they will need to know when they start reading on their more complex texts on their own in third grade and above. In addition, the knowledge building conceptually coherent text sets that are read aloud often include some informational texts. Not all of them have to be informational texts. Some can be informational, narrative, or mixed genre, both informational and narrative. But there's some research that shows that informational texts may influence the cognitive demand of the questions that teachers pose. So when teachers read informational texts, they're more likely to ask inferential types of questions. When teachers ask more inferential types of questions, children are more likely to respond with inferential language. So in some of these ways, that content-rich um, interactive read aloud does a lot of heavy lifting for building the kind of academic language and formal language of school. I'm going to introduce you to one technique you can use during your knowledge building interactive read aloud, and that is to have strive for five conversations after reading. My colleague Tricia Zucker and I have recently uh, released a book that's based on our couple of decades of our research together about called Strive for Five Conversations, where we talk about what kind of conversational moves can you have that build children's skills. And the building children's oral language skills, what's really the critical is listening to children and building on what they say so that you're responding contingently to what children say. And the Strive for Five conversational framework can easily be embedded into your read alouds. So the teacher asks a question, the child responds. In general, when the general pattern is generally teacher asks a question, child responds, and the teacher says, good job, and the conversation with that child ends. Or the teacher asks a question, the child responds incorrectly, and the teacher says, not quite. Hey, Jen, what do you think? So they move to a different child. But what if you make a marginal shift and keep the conversation going just a little bit longer with that same child? So that you ask a question, the child responds, the teacher provides, if the child responds correctly, the teacher provides an upward scaffold and provides an additional challenge to that same child. If the child responds incorrectly, partially correctly, or no response, the teacher can scaffold downward and provide additional support for the child. In both cases, that child gets an additional turn, and you get an additional turn to scaffold their response. And that just that little shift can help them see their language juxtaposed against your language model. Um, and so this is an easy thing to put into your read alouds. For example, you might start your read aloud. Most curricula have some sort of purpose for reading or a guiding question where you ask children to, I want you to think about this question as we're reading. What do sunflowers need to grow healthy and strong? Okay. And then you come back after reading, you come back to that question and you ask that strive for five question. What do sunflowers need to grow healthy and strong? You might start by having them turn and talk to one another. And then you might have popsicle sticks where you're picking a popsicle stick. You say, okay, what do sunflowers need to grow healthy and strong? And you pick a popsicle stick. Anna, And then all the children have thought about it. But then Anna and you have a strive for five conversation while the other children are listening. So this doesn't take very much time, right? And you could do three strive for five conversations with three different learners. That could be part of your routine. But in that way, you are including more children, including the children who aren't necessarily going to be the ones who are going to stand up and talk to you and be in your face and talking to you and get the language modeling that they need. It'll include your children who might be shy, English learners who might be not be producing as much language as others, or children who are entering with low language abilities. Um, and so in this example of the upward scaffold, the teacher is asking, what do sunflowers need to grow healthy and strong? And the child responds, sunflowers need soil, water, and sun. And the teacher challenges, it's a correct response. The teacher gives an upward scaffold. Yes, they need all three of those things, soil, water, and sunlight. What might happen if it didn't have much water? In our framework, the upward scaffold is that question. What might happen if it didn't have much water? The child responds, it would not grow. Yes, it would not grow without water, and it may start to wilt. You can see in that very short exchange, the teacher challenged the student to thinking and included vocabulary, expanded on what they said, all of those things very quickly in that quick exchange. Here's one that's an example of a downward scaffold. What do sunflowers need to grow healthy and strong? And the child responds, seeds. So that's a partially correct answer. So the teacher says sunflowers do grow from seeds, but do sunflower seeds need to grow in soil or paper towels to be healthy? You see at turn 3, the teacher gave an either or question. Notice that in turn 1, it was an open-ended question where a definition of an open-ended question is it requires more than a one-word response to be correct. Um, and so the teacher um, changed it to the either or question here. It's closed-ended question at turn 3. And then the child responds, they need soil to be healthy. And the teacher expands, yes, they need soil, water, and sunlight to grow and stay healthy. Okay, so the Strive for Five conversation can be embedded into your content-rich read aloud with a guiding question and coming back to that question and having 3 Strive for Five conversations with participants. Now I'm going to turn it to Heijin, and we're going to talk about knowledge. We talked about knowledge and language comprehension. She's going to talk about knowledge and reading comprehension and knowledge building literacy instruction in the upper grades and some additional classroom implications.
Thank you, Sonia. I will share my screen with you. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Sonia. Your examples are very concrete and I found very helpful. I appreciate that. Okay, let's start with theories and research on the relation between knowledge and reading comprehension. For this part of presentation, I will first explain what knowledge is, then how knowledge and reading comprehension are related to each other based on reading theories, and then share some empirical evidence on the relation between the two. Finally, I will share the most recent framework for nuanced understanding between knowledge and reading comprehension. Knowledge is information stored in our long-term memory. What reading researchers often call background knowledge or prior knowledge. There are different types of knowledge, including strategic knowledge and conditional knowledge. Today, we're focusing specifically on semantic content knowledge, the factual or conceptual information about the word that students bring to their reading. Now, how are knowledge and reading comprehension related? We have 2 major theoretical perspectives to help us understand this relation. The first is componential models, which show us the different components that contribute to reading comprehension. Active view of reading, by Neil Duke and Kelly Cartwright is one of the componential models. It indicates that content knowledge is one of components for language comprehension, which is also a component for reading comprehension and influences reading comprehension. Content knowledge also influences reading comprehension indirectly through bridging processes such as vocabulary knowledge. Direct and indirect effect model of reading, DEAR by Kim, is another componential model. Kim's DEAR model reveals that background knowledge doesn't just directly impact comprehension, it also works indirectly through other pathways, highlighting the importance of background knowledge. Additionally, it posits that background knowledge has bidirectional relations with listening comprehension and reading comprehension. The second theoretical perspective comes from process models, which explains how reading comprehension actually happens moment by moment. Kinch's construction and integration model is one of the process models that explains how background knowledge and reading comprehension influences each other. This model shows us that comprehension happens through two key phases: construction, where readers build a mental representation of the text, and integration, where they connect text information with their background knowledge. Here's a concrete example. When students read, there are two dolphins, they rise to the ocean surface and breathe. They are not just processing the words, they construct mental representation that looks something like this. Students extract the literal meaning from the text: two dolphins rising to the surface and breathing. When students already have some background knowledge about dolphins, they might activate relevant background knowledge, such as dolphins are mammals, mammals have lungs, animals with lungs must breathe air. When students successfully integrate the text information with their background knowledge, they achieve a much richer understanding than what's explicitly stated in text. This is when learning from text occurs, not just understanding what's written, but connecting it meaningfully with existing knowledge. But if students do not have the relevant background knowledge, their comprehension is likely to be limited to the literal meaning of the text. Based on the construction and integration model, knowledge and reading comprehension exist in a mutually reinforcing relationship. Better background knowledge leads to improved reading comprehension, which in turn enables readers to learn more from text, thereby building additional knowledge. This creates a virtuous cycle that accelerates learning over time. When readers do not have sufficient background knowledge, this relation might work in reverse. Limited knowledge would make comprehension difficult, which might reduce learning from text, further limiting knowledge growth. Landscape model is another process model. Landscape model describes reading as creating a constantly changing landscape of activated concepts like peaks and valleys in memory. As readers read sentence by sentence, they activate ideas from the current sentence, connect them to the previous ideas, and draw upon their background knowledge. This happens while readers' attention shifts from a sentence to a sentence in text being read. And reading process can be effortless, meaning this activation and connection of ideas are automatic. However, there is also strategic process, meaning readers need to use strategic effort like rereading or making deliberate connections for successful comprehension. What I'd like to highlight is that based on the landscape model, both background knowledge and reading strategies matter for successful reading comprehension. And the second thing I'd like to highlight is that readers' willingness to put effort into reading matters too. If readers do not want to put effort into reading, they are less likely to engage in strategic processing, which is necessary for comprehension, especially when text becomes difficult. And third, how much effort readers would put into reading are influenced by readers' standards of coherence. Standards of coherence are implicit or explicit benchmark that readers use to assess whether their comprehension is adequate to achieve their goals of reading. If their standards are high, readers are more likely to put more effort into reading to make sense of text. Now, I'd like to explain empirical evidence that might suggest mutually enhancing relation between background knowledge and reading, which was posited by the construction and integration model of reading, the Kinch's model. The two studies are longitudinal studies. I will first explain Huang McMaster and Candle 2023, and then Huang Song Relaya and John 2025. In this study, I asked the question with my co-authors, Christy McMaster and Panyayata Candle. Do science, knowledge, and reading have a one-way, unidirectional, or two-way, bidirectional relation throughout the elementary years? We used nationally representative longitudinal data, ACLSK 2010-2011, because it provides reading and science background knowledge measures at each elementary grade. We included both multilingual and monolingual students in our analysis. We used the random intercept cross-legged panel model, which gives us much better estimate of how things change over time by accounting for stable differences between individual students. Importantly, we control for early language skills, basic literacy ability, working memory, and cognitive flexibility to suggest that the relation we found were might be specifically between knowledge and reading comprehension. We found a positive bidirectional relation between broad science knowledge and reading comprehension throughout from kindergarten through 5th grade. This means science knowledge might facilitate reading comprehension, and reading development might facilitate science knowledge growth. Crucially, this pattern held true for both multilingual and monolingual students. The findings suggest that rich content knowledge is important for literacy development for both multilingual and monolingual students. The second study extended the study that I just explained to Korean students, examining social studies knowledge and reading from 4th grade through 7th grade. With my co-authors, Yu Jung-sun, Jackie Eunjung-Wilaya, and Haram Jeon, I asked the research question, do social studies domain knowledge and reading in Korean students have unidirectional or bidirectional relations longitudinally from 4th grade to 7th grade? Using the same rigorous analytic approach, we followed students through the critical transition from elementary to middle school, from 4th grade through 7th grade. We controlled for reading time, gender and socioeconomic status, well-known factors for academic achievement, as well as time spent on shadow or supplementary education, a factor that is particularly relevant in Korean educational context. This Korean study confirmed and extended the earlier findings. We found the same positive bidirectional relation between social studies, domain knowledge, and reading development, and this relation continued to operate from upper elementary through middle school grades. This cross-country replication gives us evidence that the knowledge comprehension relation might be robust across different languages, culture, and educational systems. And these are QR codes for the two papers. The papers are freely available. Okay. We are talking about the relation between knowledge and reading comprehension, and I'd like to introduce recent advances in how we understand knowledge in the context of reading comprehension. This framework is called the Multi-Dimensional Knowledge in Text Comprehension, MDKC. The MDKC framework has developed by Catherine McCarthy and Daniel McNamara. This framework focused on semantic content knowledge, which has been our focus today. Rather than treating knowledge as a single entity, this framework identifies 4 intersecting dimensions that each contribute differently to reading comprehension: amount, specificity, coherence, and accuracy. Understanding these dimensions helps us be more strategic about knowledge building instruction. For example, instead of simply trying to teach discrete facts, we can focus on teaching well-connected facts and concepts and appropriately specific to text and ensuring accuracy of information. Briefly, the amount dimension refers to how many relevant concepts students know about text content, and accuracy refers to the extent to which the reader's knowledge is correct. Accuracy is crucial because inaccurate knowledge, what we call misconceptions, can actually interfere with comprehension and knowledge development. Readers, including many individuals or perhaps everyone, may hold ideas that do not align with scientific evidence and carry pre-existing misconceptions into their reading. For example, misconceptions can be something like believing that seasons are caused by Earth's proximity to the sun rather than its axial tilt. These misconceptions are remarkably persistent because they cannot simply be overwritten. They require explicit knowledge revision processes. This is where reputational texts become useful instructional tools, explicitly addressing misconceptions while building accurate knowledge. Reputational texts are specifically designed informational texts that address students' misconceptions while building accurate knowledge. They contain 3 key components that make them effective. First, they explicitly point out the misconception. For example, many people believe seasons are caused by Earth being closer to the sun in summer. Second, they clearly refute these misconceptions. For example, this is incorrect. Third, they provide accurate information with explanation. Seasons are caused by the tilt of Earth's axis, not proximity to the sun. And meta-analysis on the effect of reputational texts on knowledge revision shows reputational texts have significant positive effects with effect sizes around 0.37 for secondary students and adults. Why would reputational texts work? When readers see their old belief and the new correct information side by side, it helps them compare and rethink what they know. And this process makes it easier for readers to update their knowledge to align with scientific findings. The specificity dimension refers to how closely knowledge relates to the specific text being read. Knowledge exists on a continuum from very broad academic knowledge to highly specific topic knowledge. This illustrates examples of specificity. When the text is about birds and the knowledge measure focus on topic knowledge about birds, this has greater specificity compared to when knowledge measure assesses domain knowledge in science or general academic knowledge about the natural and social world. Some previous studies have examined the relation between broad knowledge, not specific to text, and reading comprehension. The example study is Huang and Duke. The study demonstrates that broad science content knowledge is a key predictor for reading comprehension in general in third-grade multilingual and monolingual students. And the magnitude of the relation was stronger in multilingual students than in monolingual students, suggesting the compensatory role of broad content knowledge for less exposure to English. Some other studies focused on knowledge specific to a topic of text and reading comprehension on that topic. The studies have shown the positive relation between topic knowledge and reading comprehension on that topic. And here's an interesting study. The study focused on topic knowledge in secondary students, so knowledge with high specificity to a topic of text being read, and examined how the relation between topic knowledge and reading comprehension on that topic was changed as a function of amount of topic knowledge. O'Reilly and the team found quantifiable tipping point or threshold. So for students who scored at least 59% correct on knowledge tests about a topic of text, the link between topic knowledge and reading comprehension on that topic was stronger than those students who scored below the threshold. That is, for students above the threshold, more knowledge may mean much better reading comprehension. Below the threshold, the relation between knowledge on a topic of text and reading comprehension on that topic was weaker. As you can see, below the threshold, the slope is gentle, and beyond the threshold, the slope is steep. That is, the study demonstrated the non-linear relation between topic knowledge and reading comprehension on that topic. The author suggests important implication on practice. They stated that the existence of this threshold suggests that students might need a minimum amount of knowledge of a topic to comprehend a text about that topic. And coherence refers to how well connected pieces of knowledge are. Novice learners often have disparate, isolated facts, while experts possess richly interconnected knowledge networks. Coherently organized knowledge allows readers to activate more relevant information and generate more sophisticated inferences during reading. And let me show you a concrete example of how coherent knowledge building works in practice. This is from research by Kim and colleagues. At grade 1, students begin with foundational concrete concepts they can observe and understand, and they are answering this question: how do animals and plants depend on each other in different habitats? And building on this foundation, grade 2 students are prepared to learn about more advanced content related to this question. How do paleontologists study prehistoric events and animals like dinosaur mass extinctions? This question requires them to apply their understanding of animal survival and scientific inquiry to extinct species and geological time. And then students progress to learn more complicated content in 3rd grade, building on what they have learned previously. Now, I will talk about the intervention studies that examine knowledge building literacy instruction in upper grades, which were based on the positive relation between knowledge and reading. And I will focus on 2 intervention studies, Salvetti and the team 2016 and Proctor and the team 2020. These 2 studies were included in the meta-analysis study that Sonia explained to us. First, Salvetti Pang 2016. This experimental study included 4th grade students and compared 2 approaches to text selection. One group read 6 conceptually coherent texts, all focused on birds, whereas the control group read 6 texts on different science topics, including one about birds. The experiment carried out for 3 days. The results were notable. Students who read the conceptually connected text set not only developed better knowledge about birds, but also showed superior comprehension when reading about related but not overlapping concepts like bird songs and calls. The result shows the potential of conceptually connected texts in supporting knowledge and comprehension. And the CLAVES curriculum cultivating linguistic awareness for voice and equity in schools exemplifies effective knowledge building instruction for multilingual students. This integrated English language arts and social studies curriculum, and this was specifically designed for upper elementary multilingual learners. So CLEVS features several key instructional components, text connected around the meaningful social studies topics like workers' rights and bilingual education, explicit language instruction covering vocabulary, syntax, and morphology, and rich text comprehension and discussion activities, and targeted small group instruction. The intervention was approximately for 40 days. Quasi-experimental research shows positive effect on both standardized reading comprehension and academic language development. These findings suggest that educators can effectively support multilingual learners' academic language and reading comprehension by integrating literacy and social studies instruction and providing explicit language instruction in the context of the integrated instruction. Now, I'd like to briefly discuss classroom implications based on the empirical evidence. Let me share 4 evidence-based practices you can implement in your classrooms. Actually 5 evidence-based practices, sorry. First, plan instructional units around science or social studies content rather than isolated literacy skills. Second, use conceptually coherent text sets that build knowledge systemically rather than randomly collected text. And third and fourth, engage students in discussions and writing activities, specifically focus on building content knowledge. Fifth, explicitly teach relations among words and concepts to build coherent knowledge networks. These teaching tips are also available in the practitioner article authored by Huang, Cabell, Lupo, and Wang. You can get access to the paper by using the QR code. When planning units, start with meaningful content from your science or social studies standards rather than literacy standards alone. Consider your students' interests and cultural backgrounds to make content relevant and engaging. For example, you might plan a unit on ecosystems focusing on butterflies if students have shown interest in these creatures, or develop a unit on cultural diversity, exploring languages and breakfast traditions that connect to your students' lived experiences. The key is ensuring that literacy activities serve the purpose of building deep content knowledge rather than practicing isolated skills. Text selection should be strategic and purposeful. Instead of choosing text based solely on reading levels or isolated topics, select sets of text that building knowledge coherently around central concepts. For example, a unit on plants might include growing vegetable soup, how a seed grows from seed to plant, and the great kapok tree. And this combination provides multiple perspectives on plant growth and develop while building increasingly sophisticated vocabulary and concepts. And each text builds upon and extends knowledge from previous texts. We recommend teachers structure discussions to systematically build content knowledge using a before, during, after framework, which is suggested by West, Wright, and Godwell. Before reading, activate what students already know and are familiar with. Maybe use videos, images, or hands-on activities to build initial understanding, and record what students wonder about the topic. And during reading, refer back to previous videos, activities, and books, discuss how students' questions are being answered, and ask open-ended questions that require inference making. After reading, explicitly connect new learning to previous knowledge, discuss what students learned and still wonder about, and make connections across text and experience. And I would like to talk a little bit more about open-ended questions. When teachers ask us open-ended questions, it prompts students to engage in inference making rather than simply recalling facts. The process of generating implicit or missing ideas or information by using what we have seen, heard, or read, it is called inference making. This process involves activating and integrating background knowledge with ideas or information in the text. Here is an example of how to make inferential questions. We need to first identify missing information in text. And here are, for example, two example questions. Ferns need shade to live, and many ferns live under the rainforest canopy. What would be the missing idea or information between the two sentences? Perhaps it would be that the missing idea would be that canopy can make shade. Then we can make an inferential question about this missing information. The question can be something like, why do ferns live under rainforest canopies? And you can also check website or QR code to learn more about how to generate and use inference making questions to support young students' comprehension. In addition, engage students in writing for knowledge building. When students are engaged in writing for knowledge building, it can strengthen their knowledge and support students' skills to communicate what they know in different domains or disciplines. The key is to connect writing with reading and discussion rather than treating these as isolated activities. Let me briefly share a concrete example of engaging students in writing for knowledge building. This example is from Kim and colleagues with their research with second grade students who are studying fossils. And the lesson begins with introducing fossil content, followed by interactive read aloud and rich discussion. Then comes the crucial writing component, which was argumentative writing, addressing the question, how do paleontologists know what dinosaurs looks like? This isn't just a writing exercise, it's a knowledge building task that requires students to synthesize information, construct evidence-based argument, and communicate scientific reasoning. So students were supported with writing strategies. The tree strategy was one of the examples. So T for topic sentence that states their position, R for reasons for supporting their opinion, E for examining each reason with specific evidence, and another E for ending that reinforces their main argument. Finally, we recommend teachers explicitly teach connections among related words and concepts using concept mapping. Concept mapping is a graphical tool for organizing concepts and related words. These graphic organizers help students visualize relations among ideas and strengthen connections in their knowledge networks. Concept mapping can be used to help students see how previously learned concepts and words are related to newly learned concepts and words. So regularly visiting concept mapping can provide students with opportunities to review previously learned content and building bridges between prior knowledge and new concepts. That is, this approach helps students develop the coherent, interconnected knowledge and vocabulary knowledge that can support reading comprehension and further learning from text. And this is an example of concept mapping from the Science Ideas by Vitale and Romans. The concept mapping is about water evaporation, and this includes brief labels, node, link node, to indicate the relations among words and concepts. And thank you for joining today's webinar. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Jen, there's some questions in the Q&A. I have one I want to answer, but there's a lot of them there's several of them that are open still that I might apply to you. So why don't you take a look and I'll answer that first one. So one of the questions was, why is the emphasis on oral language? Because we can't freely express what we know in other ways. So I do use the term oral language to distinguish it from written language, but sometimes speech language, but those of you who are speech language pathologists in the group might be like, why aren't you just calling it language? You can call it language. And there are many ways we communicate. The reason why I specify oral language is versus written language, and the oral language lays an important foundation, both our understanding as well as our expression lays a important foundation for reading. If students are not able to express verbally, their understanding of the language is extremely important to their reading. So that's why I stress the oral language piece, not to exclude, but rather to stress its difference from written language.
I can. These are all the interesting questions. It's difficult to pick one.
Choose one. Choose one.
So if you guys can email me the question, then I can respond to your question. Okay. How about this? Can you explain can you explain the difference between prior and background knowledge and how that applies to curriculum and lesson execution? I think it's rather than having striking differences between the two, I think the scholars use these two terms interchangeably. And another question.
And I think, Heijen, maybe like the prior knowledge is what you're bringing right into the text. It's the prior knowledge I have about that particular topic. And some people might view background knowledge as more general, but I agree with you that those words are often used interchangeably.
Maybe I can try one more. How do we help increase the effort or motivation of our middle school readers? So specifically related to today's topic, this is where reputational texts are more frequently examined compared to elementary school years. So revising students' knowledge to enhance the accuracy, and also in middle school grades, many scholars emphasize the importance of reading multiple texts related to one another around the topic. But in addition to that, multiple texts that display different perspectives, so multiple perspectives. So how different authors make a different claim and how they use different evidence to back up their claims. And another thing that could be incorporated in why would I say middle school grades literacy instruction would be engaging students in examining the credibility of claims especially this is very important because students are reading text in online environment. So source credibility would be one of the important things that students need to know. So integrated teaching these skills in the content-rich literacy instruction or social studies or science instruction would be good choice.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna have to call it here. We're a little bit over, but we really appreciate everything you shared, Dr. Cabell and Dr. Huang. And thank you all for joining us today. It was obviously a very enlightening discussion with lots of engagement in the chat, which we'd love to see. We're sorry we were not able to get to all of your questions, but I do want to just shout out, since we had a couple about middle school, we do have a webinar focused on middle school on Thursday, so please be sure to join us for that. And tomorrow's webinar is called Where and How to Measure Comprehension to Drive Improvement. That's again going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, and you can register for that at amplify.com/fall SOR webinars. Thanks again for spending time with us today and this week, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much.